Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these screens behind me. These are stories being fed into our stations and affiliates all across the country. If it's of interest to you, we're going to bring it to you live right here on CBS News 24/7. So let's kick it off. Israel and Hezbollah exchange intensifying attacks. We'll have the very latest from the region and the U.S. efforts to prevent an all-out war on Israel's north border. Stunning allegations and a scandal rocks North Carolina's governor's race, and it could significantly impact the presidential race. Plus, a Kentucky judge murdered inside his own chambers, and the suspect is the local sheriff. But we're learning about the shooting and a possible motive. This is CBS News 24/7. Attacks are intensifying between Hezbollah and Israel this morning. Lebanon says an Israeli airstrike has hit a Hezbollah stronghold in Beirut. Lebanon's health ministry says the attack killed at least 3 people and wounded more than a dozen earlier today. Forces in Lebanon fired more than 100 rockets into Israel. Let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. She is joining us from the front lawn of the White House. So, Nancy, let me get your reaction, or the Biden administration's reaction, to what is happening on the ground there. And is diplomacy still in the cards?
Good morning, Vlad. Well, the White House continues to say that they were not informed in advance that these pagers were being timed to detonate in Lebanon and elsewhere, that they got no advance notice. And as far as diplomacy is concerned, Vlad, White House officials are saying very plainly that they're just not sure yet how the escalating situation between Israel and Lebanon is going to affect diplomacy between Israel and Hamas. They say it's simply too early to tell. They continue to insist that they're about 90% of the way there when it comes to ceasefire negotiations, but they've been saying that they're 90% of the way there for several weeks, and they say there's nothing in the past week to indicate that they're getting any closer than they were, Vlad.
And so while that fighting escalates in the north of Israel, as you know, the White House has been trying to negotiate or navigate the ceasefire. Is what is happening in Lebanon a completely separate country, completely different terrorist organization, although like Hamas, Hezbollah is backed by Iran? Is what is happening in the north complicating the talks that would have to do with Israel and Gaza?
It's hard to say because those talks were so complicated already, and the two sides were having such a difficult time bridging the gap that remains. White House officials have said that they believe that if Israel and Hamas can strike a ceasefire deal, that would calm tensions on Israel's northern border between Israel and Lebanon, and that a lot of that tension, they think, would go away. But there's no question that, the more fire that's exchanged, the more that the tension rises, the more difficult it becomes for cooler heads to prevail and for Israel and Hamas to negotiate some kind of ceasefire that would bring hostages home, an outcome that the White House and the U.S. writ large have been pushing for months now.
Indeed. All right, Nancy Cordes for us at the White House. Nancy, as always, we appreciate you on this Friday. Thank you.
Sure thing.
All right, for more on this, let's toss it over to our partners at the BBC. They are tracking what is happening between Israel and Lebanon. Let's listen.
That's right. This news emerged within the last hour that there'd been an airstrike in a southern suburb of Beirut. It's a very densely populated southern suburb of Beirut. There is a significant presence of Hezbollah members there, and it's previously been targeted, for example, during the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. This is the first Israeli airstrike in Beirut since the end of July. At the end of July, they killed a very senior Hezbollah figure, Fuad Shakur. This airstrike today, which has been confirmed by the Israel Defense Forces in a short statement, they say that the IDF conducted a targeted strike in Beirut, and that further details will follow. The images we're seeing on social media show rubble and destruction in that area, people looking through the rubble, and we've got a statement from the health ministry in Lebanon which says that at the moment 3 people, the toll is that 3 people have died, and that they have received 17 people wounded so far. But obviously this is early days. It is very soon after the strike. We are seeing other reports emerging from Lebanon with higher numbers of people who've been killed. And then in Israel, Israeli Army Radio is reporting that the target was a senior Hezbollah figure who is being named by Israeli Army Radio as Ibrahim Akil, who is a very senior figure within the movement, probably the most senior military figure following the earlier assassination in the end of July, which I just spoke about. And Ibrahim Akil is described as the head of Hezbollah's operations division. He's also described as basically the commander of Hezbollah's elite Radwan unit, which is effectively their elite commandos. He's actually wanted by the United States. The United States alleged that he had a role in attacks on in the 1980s on the US embassy and other allegations against him relating to the 1980s. And there was, I think, a $7 million bounty on his head by the United States. So that's the reports here, that he has been the target of this. But the reports from Lebanon is that there is a death toll exceeding 1 person if he was the target, and they're talking about, the health ministry talking about 3 dead.
Daniel, we will talk again in the coming minutes.
All right, you've been listening to our partners at the BBC who are covering the latest round of attacks between Israel and the Lebanese-based terror organization Hezbollah. Obviously, we're going to continue to follow those developments. Things are getting incredibly heated. As you heard from our White House correspondent, Nancy Cordes, the White House is certainly trying to navigate these delicate tensions between the Israelis and now on the northern border of Israel with Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. So we'll bring you more updates as warranted. Stay with us on that. Meanwhile, check out these, live pictures from the Georgia State Election Board. That was a cameraman re-racking the camera, focusing on people that are in that room right now, voting on a series of controversial rule changes. It's unclear if these new changes will pass. This is happening right now in the Georgia Election Board, who will begin to vote on these controversial new rules with regards to election integrity. The Vice President of the United States is actually going to be in Atlanta later this afternoon. We'll obviously keep an eye on this vote and the Vice President's movements throughout the day. Meanwhile, there's a lot of attention this morning on North Carolina's race for governor, a potential scandal in the battleground state that could have national implications. A CNN investigation uncovered a series of inflammatory comments that GOP nominee Mark Robinson allegedly made on a pornographic website more than a decade ago. Robinson denies the allegations and says he is not dropping out of the race. CBS News campaign reporter Libby Cathy is in Greensboro, North Carolina, and joins us now to talk about this. One of the things, Libby, I don't know if you caught our show this morning on CBS Mornings. We had Doug High, who's a former GOP communications director. He suggested to us that many people within the GOP knew that Mark Robinson was a problematic candidate, and yet they continued to hype him to the extent that now the former president of the United States has called him the second coming of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. times 2, the former president has said. So walk us through these allegations.
Yeah, good morning, Vlad. So CNN's K-File reporting yesterday that Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor here in North Carolina, the Republican nominee for governor, made a series of lewd, inflammatory, derogatory posts online on a pornographic website more than a decade ago, as you mentioned. Some of those comments include saying that he's a black Nazi, quote. He also expressed support for reinstituting slavery. Of course, Robinson is denying all of those allegations, and the Republican Party of North North Carolina, standing behind him this morning after the deadline to replace him on the ballot passed last night at midnight. But you're right, lots of Democrats saying that the Republicans knew this about Mark Robinson for years, and now they reap what they sow. The Democratic governor of North Carolina saying that, Vlad.
Right. So Robinson is down in that race. The other thing that Doug High told us is that this is not only going to potentially affect the former president, and North Carolina, as you've noted, Libby, is a crucial state. The polling that we have at CBS News shows that Vice President Harris and the former president are neck and neck in the state of North Carolina. So not only is it potentially damaging to the former president, how is Robinson's opponent, Josh Stein, addressing this situation?
Yes. So Josh Stein, the current attorney general here, who is the Democratic nominee for governor, put out a statement yesterday following that reporting. His campaign put out a statement, rather, saying North Carolinians already know Mark Robinson is completely unfit to be governor. Josh remains focused on winning this campaign. Josh Stein is in Raleigh today speaking at a gathering of union members. So our Nicole Killian is going to try to catch him there today. But his statement echoing, as I said, what Roy Cooper said, that Republicans in this state and what Doug High said. The Republicans in the state have known this about Mark Robinson, but Trump supported him, so the party got behind him. And so far this morning, the campaign standing behind him. Vlad.
Yeah, and, you know, the other thing that I was thinking about, Libby, is the fact that the former president has a history of endorsing certain candidates for office, whether they are running for Congress or they're running for governorship, that have had problematic past. I recall, of course, we all recall Herschel Walker running for a seat in the United States Senate in the state of Georgia. And Georgia, of course, is in the news this morning, endorsing Herschel Walker, you know, also a candidate that had a lot of past issues in his life. President unwilling to remove that endorsement. So the question, of course, is what does this story mean for folks outside of North Carolina? And have you heard at all from the Trump campaign if they're going to formally remove that endorsement of Mark Robinson?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, Vlad, North Carolina is hugely consequential battleground state, 16 electoral votes up for grabs this year. And this was Trump's most narrow win in 2020 over Joe Biden. It's not a state he wants to lose, but it's a state Democrats want to win very badly. The last time a Democrat won the top of the ticket here was in 2008 with President Obama. So absolutely, this could have down ballot effects. And the big question this morning on everyone's mind is, can Trump still win this state now that Mark Robinson is likely to be losing support, his critics say, Democrats say, with this new reporting out? The Trump campaign has told us that the reporting that Robinson has been uninvited from any campaign events is false, but they haven't posted anything since saying that they're still with him. So we'll see. The former president is coming here tomorrow. Mark Robinson is not scheduled to be at that rally with him, but there's still, 46 days to go to the election. We will see if the former president appears with Mark Robinson again in this hugely consequential state, which could determine who the next president is, Vlad.
Yeah, indeed. And I know you'll be watching and reporting from there. Libby, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, joining me now with the very latest on the Trump campaign and how the former president is responding to all this is CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi. So, Olivia, good to see you. You heard me ask Libby about the former president and how he is reacting, how the Trump campaign is reacting to these allegations. Doug High on CBS Mornings earlier told me that this is not good for the former president, given how tight the race is between him and Kamala Harris in that state. What are you hearing?
Yeah, Vlad, good to be with you. I listened to that interview with Doug High this morning on the way into the office, and I was struck by those comments because Trump advisors that I talked to say they kind of feel a little bit Teflon towards all of this with Robinson. They say that throughout this entire campaign, Trump has been polling far better than Robinson. We've seen that reflected in some of our own polling, even though you see this poll on the screen right now, where Trump and Harris are virtually tied in North Carolina or within that margin of error. But Robinson has been polling against his Democratic candidate counterpart about double digits in some polls running behind him. So the Trump campaign really believes that, even though this story has come out and Mr. Robinson has said other inflammatory remarks previously about the Holocaust and about women and about abortion, that none of that has really had any impact on Trump in the state. Now, Libby also mentioned that they're not saying whether or not Trump has or the campaign has uninvited Robinson from any of these events, but Trump has embraced him in the past. I was there in Asheville in August, where Robinson spoke before former President Donald Trump about remarks on the economy. I will say, just anecdotally, being in the room, the response to Robinson was very enthusiastic from Trump's base. So that was very notable to me back then. So we could perhaps see some distancing between the two candidates, but overall, Vlad, the Trump campaign really believes that this is not going to have much of an impact on the former president himself in that crucial state.
All right. Let me ask you, Olivia, about the remarks that the former president made last night. He was speaking at the Israeli-American Council in Washington, D.C., and he said that if he loses the election in November, Jewish voters would be partly to blame. What did you, let's play a clip of what he said, and then let's talk about how they're responding.
If we don't win this election, Israel, in my opinion, within a period of 2 to 3 years, will cease to exist. It's going to be wiped out. That's what's going to happen. It's a tough thing to say, but what difference does it make from my standpoint? I have to tell you the truth, and maybe you'll be energized, because there's no way that I should be getting 40% of the vote. I'm the one that's protecting you.
So I'm sure for even Israelis, they would be surprised to hear. Of course, the United States supplies weapons and money to Israel. Kamala Harris has suggested that she will continue the policy that the United States has had essentially since the creation of the State of Israel going back to 1947. But for the former president to suggest that if he loses, that the Jews in America would be to blame, how is the campaign responding to that?
Trump last night lamenting and criticizing Jewish Americans for not voting for him more. You heard him there talking about only 40% of Jewish Americans voted for him in the last election. And in separate remarks, it's important to note, these were dual remarks that Trump was giving in Washington, 2 separate speeches, one to the Israeli-American Council, another to a separate set of Jewish voters where he was speaking with Dr. Miriam Adelson, who's a big Republican mega donor. In both of those, making these remarks that more Jewish Americans should support him. Now, this is all coming as Trump is trying to peel off Jewish American voters from the Democratic Party. It's important to note that Jewish Americans are about 2% of the voting population, but they vote overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party. So Trump really trying to make this play for Jewish Americans that were perhaps feeling disaffected by the Democratic Party and some of the positions of the Biden administration being a little towards Gaza and this the war that has been continuing. So Trump really there trying to pull off some of those voters and making those remarks, criticizing them as well.
Yeah, what kind of struck me, Olivia, and you've been following the Trump campaign since the beginning, is that this was an opportunity for the former president to talk policy, what he would do differently, for example, than what Vice President Harris might do, except he made it all about him and about winning the election. It's something I know that you're incredibly familiar with. Olivia Rinaldi, always great to have your perspective and your reporting. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, time for weather. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa. Hey, Tammy.
Well, hello. Happy Friday to you, Vlad. We've got a couple of things to talk about. The heartland is where we're going to start. We've had some storms that have moved through. In fact, it's actually been a pretty busy couple of days. If you look into the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes region, you can see that little line of green. Those are some storms that did turn severe, and we're going to be keeping a very close eye on them. In fact, that is exactly where we're going to start today. A lot of that activity has died down. You can see that large swath, that line of storms that moved through Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and the very northern edge of Illinois, especially through places like Galena and over toward Rockford. That has now moved out of the area. In its wake, we are dealing with all these damage reports. A lot of this was hail and wind. A few funnel clouds were reported out there and some heavy rain. At the southern end of this, yeah, you did see some of that activity as well, down into parts of Kansas and northern Oklahoma. Today, the big risk is going to stretch from Michigan down through central and southern Illinois into parts of Missouri, also from Iowa through much of Kansas into the northern portion of Oklahoma. Tomorrow, the same threat is going to exist. We're going to add on a tornado threat that extends from New Mexico into Texas. We'll talk more about all this. We'll take a look at the tropics and your weekend temperatures when I come back in just a little bit. Vlad?
Yes. All right, Tammy, thanks so much. A local sheriff is charged in the murder of a Kentucky judge. What we're learning about the moments before the fatal shooting. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. A sheriff in Kentucky is behind bars this morning after allegedly shooting and killing a judge inside a courthouse. CBS News reporter Charlie DeMar is following this for us this morning. Charlie, good morning.
Vlad, good morning. We know that there was some type of argument between the county sheriff and a district judge here at the Lecter County Courthouse. What's not as clear is what that argument was about. This all happened around 3 p.m. on Thursday. Police got a call of shots fired to the courthouse here in Whitesburg, Kentucky, and once inside, authorities say they found 54-year-old District Judge Kevin Mullins had been fatally shot. Police arrested Lecter County Sheriff Sean Steins, who allegedly shot and killed Mullins following some sort of disagreement inside the courthouse. Now, Steins has been charged with first-degree murder. Police calling this an isolated incident. Kentucky's Attorney General says a special prosecutor will be assigned to handle this case. The county courthouse is closed today, and it's unclear when it will reopen. Vlad?
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. The European Union has pledged billions of dollars to help Ukraine rebuild its infrastructure. Relentless attacks from Russia has damaged the power grid that supplies energy to not only Ukraine, but also neighboring countries. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is in London now and joins me to talk about this. Ramy, it's good to see you. So how has the war between Russia and Ukraine strained the infrastructures within Ukraine, and what's the plan?
Yeah, right now, Vlad, Ursula von der Leyen is in Kyiv to talk just about that. And she says that Ukraine has the power to decide how best to use the money, the new money that's going to them. It's a loan of 35 billion euros. That's roughly equivalent to about $39 billion. And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky right there said one of his top priorities is to rebuild the country's energy grid. And that's because Russia's destroyed about half of the whole entire power network there ever since Russia invaded back in 2022. Today, people in the country's east, we understand, are living through rolling blackouts that could stretch up to 4 hours at a time. And Zelensky said not only does he want to focus on the energy infrastructure, but he wants to build more bomb shelters as Russia continues its pounding of the country, but also to rebuild schools, try to get some semblance back to some kind of normal life. And of course, no surprise, to buy more weapons and ammunition. But, you know, one other thing he's focusing on is heating. The winter heating season starts up in just a couple weeks, and we all know it drops very quickly below freezing there, and when it goes through March.
Ramy, let me ask you about the funds that are going to Ukraine that are actually because of Russian money. Break that down for me.
Yeah. Von der Leyen said that we should, this is her quote, we should make Russia pay for the destruction it's caused. And the EU is managing to do that. That loan, the 35 billion euro loan, is actually being underwritten by the profits from Russian money, the Russian assets that have been seized and frozen in EU banks. Most of that, turns out, is in Belgium. In total, there's about $300 billion of Russian assets that have been frozen. And interest from that is estimated to be about 3 billion euros every year, most of that going to a fund for military aid for Ukraine. So, Vlad, in effect, the Russian money that has been seized is helping support Ukraine's military. The first tranche, we understand, is expected to be sent, though, next summer, next July.
Fascinating. Ramy, thanks for your reporting, my friend. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah, you bet. Take care.
All right. Would you get on a roller coaster that suspends in midair? Believe it or not, you may get your chance. We're going to tell you about this new ride and where it's located just ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following this morning. Closing arguments begin today in the trial of the man who shot and killed 10 people at a Colorado grocery store in 2021. Ahmad Elisa, who has schizophrenia, is facing 10 counts of first-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His attorneys acknowledged he was the shooter, but argue that he was legally insane at the time. A jury determined that Sesame Place is not liable in a racial discrimination lawsuit. You may remember this video that went viral back in 2022. Let's see the video. Oh, okay, we don't have it. So in the video, let me describe it then. A costume Sesame Street character appeared to ignore two young black girls during a parade at the park. It was really sad and really heartbreaking. There was a $25 million lawsuit that was filed against Sesame Place, claiming the characters refused to interact with the kids based on the color of their skin. But on Thursday, the park was spared the fine after the jury unanimously determined that the defendants were not liable. And here's one for all of you thrill seekers out there. A roller coaster that completely separates in midair. Yeah, you heard that. It separates in midair. Cedar Point in Ohio is debuting its new coaster called Siren's Curse early next year. The park says it will be the tallest, longest, and fastest coaster in North America. And in its signature moment, riders come to a dead stop on a broken off section of the track, tilt vertically 90 degrees. The track locks into place as riders stare straight down and then sends them off at 58 miles per hour. I mean, look, when I was a little kid, my dad took me to, like, I think Great Adventure or something in New Jersey, Six Flags Great Adventure, and he put me on the Buccaneer, which is that boat that swings back and forth. You know the Buccaneer? Oh, yeah. Screamed my head off, like bloody murder, never again. So yeah, if you want to go, you guys are all welcome to buy your tickets. I'll be right here in this virtual studio. Let's take you back to Atlanta now. These are some live pictures from the Georgia State Election Board. They're voting on a series of controversial rule changes which could delay Election Day voting results. The most contentious would require precincts to hand count the votes to ensure they match the machine tally before certification. Democrats and the Republican Secretary of State have voiced concern about these rules. The state Democratic Party has filed a lawsuit against those new rules passed in August, which focused on voter registration documents. That trial is set for October 1st. We're going to continue to follow this story, bring you updates from that room, and as soon as we learn the results of the vote, you're going to learn about them right here on CBS News 24/7. All right, updating you now on the fighting playing out in the Middle East. Lebanese health officials said an Israeli strike on Beirut killed at least 3 people. More than a dozen others are hurt. This is the latest in a barrage of attacks from Israel, for both Israel and Hezbollah in the last few hours. Let's toss it over to our partners at the BBC on the ground in Beirut.
Just tell us more.
Yeah, Matthew, so it's coming up to 5:30 here in Beirut. So we are here in Dahir, which is Beirut's southern suburb that is a stronghold of Hezbollah. We're not really far from the location that was hit in this Israeli airstrike. It is a very tense situation. Got to tell you that we can't really move here because we've been told by Hezbollah supporters, Hezbollah members, that we need to sort of stay here. But to my right, a few blocks from here, is the building where that was targeted in this Israeli airstrike. It happened at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, and you can see that this is a densely populated area of Beirut. So this happened in the middle of the afternoon, and now we know that there is a search operation. People are reported to be under the rubble. We've seen that there's some destruction there, at least one building that's partially collapsed. At least, you know, the facade of the building has collapsed as a result of this airstrike. And now the Lebanese authorities are saying that at least 3 people have been killed. Now, the Israeli military has confirmed that the target of this operation was Ibrahim Akil, who is a senior Hezbollah official. So it's saying, the Israeli military is saying that this was a targeted operation, and now there is obviously a lot of tension here. This has been a week in which Hezbollah has suffered a massive security blow, and it seems that this is another attack targeting a key Hezbollah figure here in Beirut.
All right, you've been listening to our partners over at the BBC who are covering this strike that Israel says it launched in Beirut. These are live pictures coming into us of Beirut. CBS News now confirms that at least 8 people have been killed in these attacks in Lebanon. Of course, we're going to continue to follow these developments and the tension in the region. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris is set to make stops in critical swing states, Georgia and Wisconsin. Today it comes after she shared the stage with Oprah Winfrey last night in Michigan. The event was aimed to rally support among local voters and grassroots groups. During the conversation, the vice president doubled down on the need for gun legislation while also discussing her own gun ownership.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot. Here's my point, Oprah, is that I'm not trying to take everyone's guns away. I believe in the Second Amendment, but we have to agree that, look, I did last fall a college tour with college-age young people, and I would ask, please raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade you had to endure an active shooter drill. Almost every hand went up. It was bone-chilling.
CBS News campaign reporter Shauna Mizell is here with us now to talk about this. So we just heard, Shauna, from the vice president, who reaffirmed her commitment to the Second Amendment while also condemning the gun violence that we've seen almost on a weekly basis here in the United States in schools. Are there concerns that some of the ideas that she has for sensible gun ownership could alienate some voters?
I don't think so, Vlad. The point that the vice president was really seeking to make last night is that she owns a gun. She has touted the fact that Tim Walz owns a gun, and this is also something that he leans into. But they say that they support universal background checks as well as other initiatives like universal background checks and assault weapons bans. And so this doesn't seem like anything that could alienate voters, but it actually seems like an attempt by Harris and the campaign to bring in a broader base of voters and broaden their coalition.
Yeah, it wasn't lost on me that she again reaffirmed during that conversation with Oprah Winfrey that she owns a gun. It was something that she also said during the debate, which I think had a lot of people sort of saying, oh, I didn't know that the vice president of the United States was a gun owner herself. But did she address any plans on how she would fix this crisis that this nation is facing, which are mass shootings that happen almost regularly? We had them on the very first day of school in 2024. She talked about assault weapons and banning perhaps assault weapons and having some kind of national background check.
Exactly, but the point is that she's going to need Congress to do this, and just so far they just haven't been able to successfully get that legislation passed.
All right, so she's also holding an event later today focused on reproductive rights. What are you hearing about that?
Vice President Harris is going to head to Georgia to focus on reproductive rights, and this event is happening in Georgia specifically because there was a ProPublica report that came out this week that discovered 2 women in Georgia died, and they tied those deaths to the abortion ban there, where there is a 6-week abortion ban in place. They determined that these deaths would have been preventable, and we actually saw one of the families of one of those women in the event last night in Michigan with Harris as well.
All right, Shauna Mizell, always great to have you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vlad.
Voters in 3 states can now cast their ballots. Early in-person voting has started today in Virginia, South Dakota, and Minnesota. That is, of course, the home state of the Democratic vice presidential nominee, Governor Tim Walz. It comes as both campaigns spent the last several weeks touring battleground states. CBS News Minnesota reporter Pauline Lee has a look at how state leaders there are preparing for the anticipated high turnout today.
Hey everyone, Pauline Lee here with CBS News Minnesota. Well, early voting begins today here in Minnesota. In fact, some polling locations across the state opened as early as 8 o'clock this morning. So state leaders here are really stressing the importance of getting in those mail-in ballots early. That's because obviously November is going to be a general election, tends to see a higher turnout than, say, something like a primary. And so the last thing that they would want is any ballots to be stuck or delayed in the mail. That's why they're encouraging voters here in Minnesota to get those ballots in earlier, the better. So anyone here voting by mail in Minnesota, they can actually track their ballot and make sure it gets to where it needs to go before Election Day. There's a tracking code on it. And also, all the mail-in ballots, they just have to be received by 8 o'clock on election night to be counted. Now, with all of the concerns about election security, state leaders here, they're really emphasizing some of the key security measures that are in place that have been long-standing here in Minnesota to ensure that our elections are safe, secure, and accurate. Some things include public accuracy tests to make sure sure that all election equipment at those election offices are working properly. On election night, every precinct also has to make sure that the same number of ballots were cast as registered voters. And we also use paper ballots here as well, which is also has a built-in kind of safety measure in that. And they have to keep those ballots for about 2 years under lock and key even after the election. And speaking of after the election, the work isn't over yet. All the precincts in Minnesota, they'll have to conduct an audit. That's to ensure elections worked with perfect accuracy. For CBS News Minnesota, I'm Pauline Lee. We'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Pauline. Appreciate it. Let us bring back CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa with another look at the national forecast. Tammy.
Well, you know, we already talked about what's going on with the severe weather. Let's talk about the heat, because the heat is making a huge return across much of the nation, at least the central part of the nation. Look at this. Dallas and Abilene, Odessa, over to Santa Fe, El Paso, Houston. Let's go all the way back up to Chicago, well into the 80s, near 90 in some places. If you want any relief, you got to head over to the Pacific Northwest, places like Jackson, Wyoming, and on up towards Seattle. That's where the cool air has filtered in. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about this big heat that we're going to be dealing with over the weekend. We have this big heat bubble across the central part of the country. Now, we have a dip in the jet stream. It's called a trough, and that's where the cooler air is settling in. So places in the Pacific Northwest and even into the Intermountain West enjoying some of that. We're going to be watching this all shift slightly to the east over to the weekend, and it looks like perhaps that hot air will then build into the southeast, bringing a little bit of cooling to parts of the plains who really need it. So here's what we're looking at temperature-wise. We're going to be looking, of course, at heat in Florida. That goes without saying. But you get into the northeast, look at New York and into the upper 70s. We're going to be looking at the plains. So we're looking at the 90s to the triple digits. And then we head out west, and there is that refreshing air all the way down, even I would even say into Phoenix, where they're looking at 90s. Another place that we're watching that is heating up is the tropics. We do have a couple of disturbances out in the Atlantic. Not expecting these to cause any problem. About a 20% chance of development in the next 48 hours or so for either of these, but they're not expected to affect the U.S. The place we are watching very closely is here in the Caribbean and the Gulf. We are looking at a large area. It's called a gyre, and it is spinning around, and what it will do is it will possibly spin up some areas of low pressure that could then turn into tropical cyclones or eventually tropical storms and hurricanes. Right now, there are models that take all of this activity up into the Gulf of Mexico. Not a good thing. 40% chance of something developing, and we have models that take it over into the Bay of Campeche. So we're going to have to watch, but this looks like it could be the mid part or end of next week, and something does look like it will likely develop there. No surprise. Look at the water temperatures, 85 to 90 degrees. That's one of the main ingredients that you need to get tropical systems going across the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Tammy, thanks so much. Coming up, we take a closer look at the scandal involving London's famed department store Harrods and the sexual assault allegations against the late owner of the store. That's Mohammed Al-Fayed there on the screen. We'll be right back. London's luxury department store Harrods has apologized after allegations emerged that its former owner, billionaire businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed, raped and sexually assaulted some ex-employees. According to a BBC News investigation published yesterday, more than 20 women say they were sexually assaulted by the billionaire, with 5 claiming they were raped. Al-Fayed, who died last year, had previously denied accusations of sexual assault. Azadeh Mushiri, with our partners at BBC News, has more on today's developments.
Now, I'm standing in front of the building where the press conference by the lawyers took place. In that room, about 20 women who've brought forward their stories listened as the lawyers detailed their civil case against Harrods for failing to set up a safe system of work for their employees. They've said that this civil case they're bringing forward is partly possible because of the network that the BBC investigation has exposed, and that more women are coming forward as a result of that investigation. Now, the BBC's work piecing together testimonies from more than 20 ex-employees has revealed a pattern of sexual abuse and predatory behavior by Mohammed Al-Fayed. It's also gathered evidence that Harrods failed to intervene at the time of these allegations, but also helped cover up the allegations of abuse. What we heard today were accounts from lawyers as well as a victim of the fear and the abuse that they say they suffered at the hands of Mohammed al-Fayed. And where does this leave the current owners? Well, Harrods did change ownership in 2010, but it continued to exist as a legal entity and therefore is still responsible for the claims of wrongdoing that would be brought forward by former employees. And they have settled some of those claims, but they've never admitted responsibility or accepted any blame. What Harrods has said is that they're utterly appalled by these claims and that they have set up their own system to settle these claims as quickly as possible so that these women don't have to go through a lengthy legal process. Clearly, that's not enough for some of these women. And while they may have been afraid of speaking out in the past, as one of the victims, Natasha, said on that podium today, they're no longer afraid and they no longer feel that they live in a time where women are the underclass of the working world. Asde Mashiri, BBC News for CBS.
Well done, Asde. All right, LA Dodgers Shohei Ohtani etched his name into MLB history by clinching 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in a single season. He also had one of the greatest single-game performances of all time. So we're going to show you how fans are reacting to the superstar's incredible achievement. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Los Angeles Dodgers star, that's Shohei Ohtani, became the first player in MLB history to record 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in a single season last night. Ohtani hit 3 homers and had 10 runs batted in and went 6 for 6 at the plate. It's an incredible performance. CBS News Los Angeles reporter Cara Finstrom joins us now from Los Angeles' Little Tokyo neighborhood. So, Cara, let me ask you first off, what are you hearing from Dodgers fans about Ohtani reaching this historic milestone, which, just to put it in perspective, like no one is even close in Major League Baseball?
No. Amazing, isn't he? He is the talk of the town here this morning. Ohtani already had a special spot in fans' hearts and even across LA's skyline. Look at that beautiful mural up there. Now he has secured that spot in the history books. Number 17, take a look at this. He actually thrilled Dodger fans yesterday with 3 home runs as the team played the Marlins. Now the Dodgers, they would love to get their hands on that historic baseball. The fan who caught it reportedly took it home rather than negotiate, but sports memorabilia experts predict it could be worth $500,000. Ohtani, of course, also had 2 steals. That secured him the second part of that 50-50 status. Again, the only player ever to achieve it. Over in the Melrose area of LA earlier, we caught up with another street artist who was paying tribute.
I wanted to make sure that the chances were good that he was going to hit the 50-50, although I did have exceptional confidence that he would. And I thought that maybe I would have an extra day to finish before he met that moment. But lo and behold, today's game was absolutely bonkers.
And by the way, Ohtani is also an elite pitcher. He has not been pitching this season because he's got an elbow injury. Hard to believe that with his record. But a lot of folks thinking because he was able to really focus on the other aspects of his game, it allowed him to accomplish this incredible feat.
Yeah, incredible indeed. Cara, thank you very much. I don't know what I'd do with that ball. I probably would hold on to it just a couple, because that Mark McGwire ball went for $3 million, Cara. Yeah. I'm going to hold off. $500,000 sounds good, but in 5 years, if nobody comes close, I'm holding on to it.
Right.
All right, Cara.
I think that's
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you very much, Cara. Appreciate you. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa with a last look at the national forecast. Tammy.
Well, with that ball, you could actually buy a lot of air conditioners for the heartland right here. A lot of heat building from the Gulf Coast up through the central part of the country. We still have ongoing showers and storms from the Great Lakes all the way back into the Midwest. Those will head eastward. A nice sunny day in the Northeast. Rain in the far southeast across Florida especially. Some rain out toward Las Vegas and north of the Mogollon Ridge. And we have cooler air filtering into the Northeast. Vlad?
All right, Tammy, thank you very much. An encore of CBS Mornings coming up next. This is CBS News 24/7.